I had a very good education from my parents when it comes to ultra-processed foods. And they always told me that all Westerners are sick and unwell because they eat all the ultra-processed foods and McDonald's and things like that. Being vegan was the worst I've ever felt. On the carnivore diet, I'd sustained mental energy and mental clarity throughout the day. I didn't have any cravings. I didn't feel hungry. I didn't feel irritable. My sleep was really good. Didn't train properly. Worked 12 hours a day just the 2 days before the race. Then I did the race fasted and I felt amazing the whole time.
All right, perfect. Welcome. We have with us Veronika all the way from down under in Australia. Veronika, thanks for agreeing to do this. How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's early morning here. It's still dark. It's 7 a.m. I went for a run to wake up and I'm here and thanks for having me.
It's a good way to wake up. That's awesome. I usually go for some sort of activity. It's always great to get moving in the morning, usually because before the day gets in you and then you sometimes don't have the energy at the end of the day sometimes. So it's good to get it out of the way. You have a bit of a success story you're going to share with us, I understand. So I guess maybe just tell us a little bit about you, Veronika. You've got a little bit of an accent, so you may be from somewhere else. I'm guessing somewhere, maybe Eastern Europe, if I had to guess. I don't know, maybe that's correct or not, but tell us a little about yourself.
Okay, so I came to Australia 21 years ago from the Czech Republic to study sport and exercise science. And then I ended up staying. And so I'm an exercise physiologist, nutritionist, and I also have my own brand of healthy food snacks, which I guess I can't mention here, but yeah, that's what I do at the moment. I make some amazing meat-based products and supplements, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to try the carnivore diet. So a few reasons. Obviously, as a nutritionist, I have a lot of people at the moment asking me about carnivore diet, wanting me to help them, and I always like to try everything firsthand. So in the past, believe it or not, I even tried the vegan diet. And so I decided to do carnivore diet for a month. And because there is not that much data out there, I decided to test myself. So I did my full panel blood test before I did a full gut microbiome mapping. And I also did my DEXA scan. Then I did carnivore diet for a month and then I would retest it for the bloods and the gut microbiome, waited for 6 weeks to get my DEXA. And also on the week 4 of the carnivore diet, I ran a 50 kilometers trail race.
That's pretty long. Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
I've never enjoyed. I ran cross country in high school for a year. I think the farthest we ever ran was about a half marathon distance of 13 miles or whatever that is in kilometers, 20K or something like that. But I don't enjoy the distance running anymore, but good for you for doing that. So I was born next to the Czech Republic and Germany, right on the border, literally on the border of the Czech Republic. Interestingly.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've been to what was in Czechoslovakia, Prague one time many years ago. But when you grew up, did you have any sort of any dietary sort of influences there? I don't know if it was like in the Czech Republic whenever you were young, some years ago, I assume, but
I grew up eating really healthily. So our diet was mainly meat-based, as same as everywhere else in Europe. So we would eat meat every single day, meat, eggs, not so much fish. It was mostly red meat and pork that we ate. And also we used to eat a lot of kefir and other fermented dairy, fermented vegetables, fermented drinks. So a lot of fermented foods, a lot of meat. And as a result, in my 20s, when I moved to Australia, I was pretty much carnivore, except for I was eating like a little bit of berries here and there, but most of my diet was just eggs, meat, sashimi, and things like that. And I felt amazing. So yeah, I was very lucky to grow up with parents who were very healthy, no ultra-processed foods. If my mom wanted to make us a treat, she would use quark or kefir and blend it with fruits and honey, and that was our treat. Or my grandma used to blend raw egg yolks with cacao and honey for chocolate sauce and things like that. So I'm really lucky in that regard. I didn't grow up on ultra-processed foods or pre-made meals and things like that.
Yeah, it's a huge advantage. And you think about today, kids are growing up on something like 70, at least in the US, 70% of their diet is coming from ultra processed food. It's interesting because, that region of Europe, Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic, as it's now called, that was the heart of, I think about the result of this population called Gravedians, which kind of range in that region. They were basically specialist mammoth hunters. So that's been a really central for eons, for millennia after millennia, tens of thousands of years. People were eating a lot of meat in that area. So it's interesting that kind of stayed on. So when you moved to Australia, I assume there's a little bit of a dietary shift because the culture is different. And Australia is probably getting not as bad as the U.S., but it's probably closer to the U.S. than Czech Republic was, at least back in the day. Did your diet shift much towards more ultra-processed food in Australia, or did you stay pretty much where you were?
No, not at all. I had a very good education from my parents when it comes to ultra-processed foods. They had very strong opinions about it. They thought that, because I grew up in communism, so like the Eastern Bloc, and they always told me that all Westerners are sick and unwell because they eat all the ultra-processed foods and McDonald's and things like that. So I never liked that. McDonald's actually opened in my hometown when I was 16 years old. So I didn't develop the palate towards ultra-processed food. So my diet has changed. When I came to Australia, I started to eat more seafood because we don't really have a good seafood, or didn't have back then in Eastern Europe. So I started to eat a lot of sashimi and oysters and a lot more fish. And I also realized the Aussie steak is better than in the Czech Republic. So more fish and more steak, not so much ultra-processed foods. I never really liked it. And even now, I try to avoid it. It's not really my thing.
Yeah, that's a good point, because what we often see is a lot of the adult patterns that carry on for the rest of our life are laid down in our early teenage years, young adult years, and that's whatever we start eating then is what we stick with. So parents have a tremendous influence on the rest of your life by how they feed you in those formative years as you start to become more, I guess, grown. And if you start out eating just garbage in your teenage years, you tend to do it the rest of your life, unfortunately. So good for you for avoiding that. Now, let me ask you, you said you experimented with veganism at one point. What drove you in that direction, since you're already healthy by what you were saying? So why would you want to do veganism?
I didn't do it for health. I knew it is not going to be healthy, but as a nutritionist, I try to help my clients to be the best they can be within their constraints, or what they want to do. So instead of trying to convince them to start with to not be vegan, I was trying to help them to be healthy vegan, and I didn't have much idea of recipes, and I also wanted to experiment with it and feel what it feels like. So I went to Bali and did the vegan chef course for a month. I turned vegan just for that month, and no, I did not feel amazing. And as a result, I actually convinced a lot of my vegan clients who definitely don't want to eat meat, but I at least convinced them to supplement with collagen, which is a big win because that's an animal product. But yeah, I did not. Being vegan was the worst I've ever felt, even though it's only a month.
Yeah, fair enough. Some people say they feel better going vegan. But like I said, it wouldn't work for me. I know that. I have no desire to do that.
People feel better to turning vegan because if they turn from eating ultra-processed foods and lots of junk to eating vegetables, of course they're going to feel better. I think when you eat lots of junk, any whole foods diet is going to make you feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that vegetables are inherently so healthy, or is it because they're replacing all the garbage that's out there? And I think it may be a lot of the latter, quite honestly. And some people will say the same thing about a carnivore diet. The only reason you're healthy is because you aren't eating junk now. And there's some truth to that, but most people don't do carnivore as their first line. Many of them have already tried some sort of whole food diet. Maybe it's a plant-based diet, maybe it's a Mediterranean diet or something like that. There's a few that go straight from standard American, but most don't. Okay, so you tried veganism, felt awful, you wanted to do it and I get that. I do my own experiments, so I know what it feels like for me before I try to share it with someone else, so that makes sense. So I guess there's some sort of success story here, maybe not, but tell us what you do a carnivorous diet now, or you did it at Carnivore. What's going on today with you?
That is a success story, yes and no. I did all the testing and I sent you the test, but I really didn't have a time to look at them. But a lot of my tests have improved. I'm 44, and last year I was at my fittest and healthiest. And this year, I don't know why, I think it's a lot to do with my workload and stuff. I just did not feel really well. And so I thought I tried to do some changes. So one of the reasons why I tried the carnivore diet is to get my gut health better and to see how it feels to run on ketogenic diet. As I said, I did my blood test, gut test, and the exam before and after, and I had some good results. I think the biggest thing for me was the mental clarity and a sustained energy during the day. I have really long days. I usually train at 4:30 or 5 a.m. and then I go to work from 6 and I don't finish until 5 or 6. And when I have a coffee in the morning and my regular diet, I usually crash in the afternoon around 3 and I get really tired. But then I don't want to have another coffee because if I do, then I can't sleep at night and then makes me tired again. On the carnivore diet, I had sustained mental energy and mental clarity throughout the day. I didn't have any cravings. I didn't feel hungry. I didn't feel irritable. My sleep was really good. And the interesting thing is, and I actually want to say, I do once every 6 months, 5-day water only fast. And during the fast, I measure myself with Oura Ring, and my HRV goes really high and my resting heart rate goes really low and my stress levels are non-existent, which is what happened also on the carnivore diet. And it's really interesting because now I'm on modified carnivore, but on the days when I do have more carbohydrates or I eat later at night, even though it's not a junk food, my HRV goes down and my resting heart rate goes up, which is what I wanted to ask you about that, because that I think it's really interesting, because it's not like I'm eating junk or drinking alcohol, but even a small changes in diet make a huge difference to those values.
Yeah, I've seen that before. Certainly way back when I was first talking about this diet, before it was even called a carnivore diet, I had about 100 people that we convinced to do a meat-based diet for 90 days. And all of them, as I recall, saw their heart rate improve by about 10 points. It just dropped by resting heart rate went down, which is generally considered a good thing. We didn't have ways to just check HRV. It was all just what we could get basically for free. And checking your pulse doesn't cost anything. Definitely see that. I've seen that many people. I think a lot of people are big believers in HRV as being a sign of health. So the more variability we have beat to beat is considered better for many reasons. Although it's unclear what it really means in my view. It's still one of those things that, maybe it means something good, maybe it doesn't. Yeah, you'd mentioned because you weren't eating junk. It was just some normal, probably regular whole food carbohydrates, and yet still that was making you HRV differences, heart rate differences, sleep differences, and fatigue differences. So it's pretty interesting to see it. And many people do comment on their overall energy improvement once they get adapted to this. Now, the thing that a lot of people will find interesting, and maybe you can share, because I haven't seen this, but share with us what was going on with the microbiome, because a lot of people will tell us that, oh my gosh, you need all this fiber for a healthy microbiome. And if you don't, you're going to lose all this diversity. What was your experience with a carnivore diet with pre and post microbiome testing, if you don't mind sharing that?
So that was super interesting because my diet is normally low in carbohydrates. I don't need any rice, pasta, and things like that. My carbohydrates are just like a little bit of sweet potatoes, some veggies, some berries, so not really high in carbs. But my test before the carnivore diet showed that I had a really imbalance in the ratio of firmicutes and bacteroidetes. I had so much more firmicutes, which is inflammatory, and it's like someone who eats a lot of sugar, which I don't. And after the carnivore diet, after the month on the carnivore diet, that ratio has switched to the healthy ratio. So now I have less firmicutes and more bacteroidetes, which is great, and less inflammation as well. So I think that was very interesting, and I'm really happy with that, and I would like to keep that trend up because my ratio is not great yet, but it has switched from bad to good one, but it just needs to improve a little bit better.
Yeah, so a theoretical improvement in your microbiome floral composition with more of the bacteroides and less of the firmicutes. And I've seen that many times, and believe it or not, I've talked to people that not everybody does microbiome testing, but I've seen some people that have had gut issues like things like ulcerative colitis. In fact, there's another fellow down in Australia that did that, and he over a period of sequential, I think he tested several times over a period of a year or two, and what he saw was a continued improvement in his microbiome as he was longer and longer on a carnivore diet, which is interesting to see because most people will tell you need all this fiber for a healthy for gut bacteria diversity, and perhaps that isn't true. And it's not been my experience that it's true, but it's one of those things that people use as a reason to not do this diet. were you having, you said gut inflammation was down as well, and sometimes we measure that with something like a fecal calprotectin. I don't know what was used in this particular case, but clinically, did you have any kind of actually palpable gut issues on your regular diet? Maybe some bloating or something like that? Did that go away, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, I always have some, not always, but I often get bloated. I get stomach cramps sometimes for no apparent reason. And when I was on the carnivore diet, I did not have any stomach cramps or bloating once. Just haven't had any stomach symptoms whatsoever. So I don't know what causes it, if it was the veggies or the coffee, or I don't know. But yeah, I'm on the carnivore diet, didn't have any of those symptoms. So that was great. And I also had a great results from my race. So just to put the picture out there, the race was in the Blue Mountains. It's the biggest trail race in Australia. It's very difficult. And they have expo 2 days before the race, which is where I had a stall with my brand. And I was there working 12 hours a day by myself before the race. So I wasn't really resting. And I didn't really put a lot of training into it because I was really busy with work. So I didn't train properly, worked 12 hours a day, just the 2 days before the race. Then I did the race fasted. I didn't eat anything before or during. I tried to during a little bit of biltong, but then I didn't feel like having it, so I just didn't. And I felt amazing the whole time. I did quite a good time considering that I didn't train properly. I felt good the whole way through. I was mentally and physically really well. I didn't feel sore, didn't have any issues. And especially I felt good afterwards. Normally what happens, I have low-carb diet all year round, but when I race, I usually have carbohydrates before and during. I have natural gels or I made my own, but it's very high in carbohydrate, like pretty much sugar and caffeine. And what happens is after every race like that, I usually crash. I get really irritable, cold, and really exhausted. I have mental fog. And a lot of the times in the past when I wasn't prepared for a race, I also got injured and had tendon inflammation and a lot of tendonitis and tendon-related injuries. So after this race, I didn't feel tired at all. I didn't feel hungry. I forced myself to have some steak because I thought I should eat, because I had to pack up all my expo gear into my car, drive 1.5 hours back to Sydney and unload it all in my office. And I was so full of energy the whole day. I just felt like I went for a morning jog. I did not feel exhausted, didn't feel irritable. I was up until 10 p.m. that night, cleaned my whole house. I was just full of energy and just felt really good mentally and physically, which has never happened before. Normally, I'll just go home and crash in the bed and lie and have some tea and read a book and just feel sorry for myself. So that was amazing. And the next day, I woke up and I wasn't sore, which is also incredible because the race finished with 1,400 stairs, which are really steep, and I wasn't prepared for it, so I was expecting to be really sore. I wasn't sore at all, wasn't tired. I gave myself 2 days break, just not to be silly and not start training again. But after 2 days, I started running, training, doing weights, felt completely fine, no injuries. So that was also remarkable. And then when I did my DEXA scan, that showed that I've gained 1 kilogram lean muscle mass in the 6 weeks, which is also incredible because I was running a lot. I was running more than doing strength training, and I still managed to put 1 kilo, which it's a lot for my frame because I only weigh around 50, 53 kilos. So those were really great results. There are a few results of my testing that were in that, which I want to ask you about, but there is more positives than negatives.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're mostly run, put on muscle mass, have a good time, not be sore after a huge ultra marathon distance race. And I've heard that before from people. They say they just, like my friend Zach Bitter, who would often do very long races in a low carb state, said the swelling in his legs, the pain, the soreness was much, much less. And there's some studies out there that show less oxidative stress in this type of strategy versus a carb loading or a gel consuming race strategy. So good for you for doing that. Let me ask you before I'm happy to talk about some of the other labs you had that you're questioning about, but let me ask you, as someone who is a nutritionist and deals with people trying to adjust their diet, have you found an uptick in the number of people that are interested in carnivore, or is it still heavily plant-based, or what is the mix here in recent times? Have you seen some sort of a shift?
Oh my God, massive shift towards carnivore. When I was at the expo before the race, there were people coming up to me, like other competitors, talking to me about carnivore diet. There was a lady that was in her 60s who was running 100 kilometers on carnivore diet, and she made me her own carnivore bar and brought it for me. Like really, in Australia at least, there's a lot of people shifting towards carnivore diet, and if not pure carnivore, towards eating more meat. More organic, grass-fed, grass-finished beef, and yeah, it's a big shift.
Yeah, I guess that's encouraging to see, because we keep hearing there's always overtures about we need all to go plant-based and everybody's going plant-based. But that's not the reality. I think we see all these sort of fake meat companies collapsing. Their interest is low. None of them, even the cultured lab meat people that venture capitalists sunk literally hundreds of millions of dollars in, are now just, they can't get funding anymore because it's, I think,
where I live in my suburb, we had 2 years ago so many vegan restaurants and cafes, and they're all gone now. There's none of them left, not one.
Yeah, I'm super upset about that. If I ever get down to Australia, and I've never been, I used to live in New Zealand, but hopefully at one point I'll get down there, because I know there's a lot of people that are good people down there, some good ranchers and farmers, and certainly it'd be fun to hang out and see some of those folks. So you said your labs you're happy with the results. Obviously you feel better, which is really the ultimate. I think to me, that's the ultimate result, because how do we feel, perform, look? That trumps everything else in my view. But you had some questions or concerns about something. What would those things be?
There's few things that I was concerned about. So besides putting on 1 kilo of muscle, I also put on 1.5 kilos of fat, and I also put some visceral fat. So that I didn't like that, because that's quite a lot on my frame. And then also my cholesterol went from 5.4 to 9.2. My HDL from 2.2 to 3, which is good, but my LDL went from 3 to 6. Yeah. And my non-HDL cholesterol went from 3.2 to 6. So I was just wondering, what do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting, because you are, even though you gained a little bit of body fat, you're very lean. I can look at you and say you're clearly quite a lean person. The most likely reason to see big rises in total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, non-HDL cholesterol, ApoB, and sometimes even HDL to a degree, is how lean you are. If you go on a low-carb diet or a carnivore diet, which is clearly a low-carb diet, and you are very lean, you are much more likely to see your cholesterol rise. That is due to something called a lipid energy model, which has now been published in many studies. There was a really good meta-analysis of randomized control trials on people on low-carb diets and looking at their cholesterol, why it went up. This is published just this year, back in January, by a guy named Adrian Sotomoda, who is a friend of mine. They showed that basically the number one reason for rises in LDL cholesterol is being lean. And it's because when you deplete your glycogen stores, so you have less glycogen perhaps in your liver, and you need energy because you're exercising. And really I'll call it the worst combination, is being lean and working out a lot, because then you really need a lot of energy, right? Yeah. Where's that energy going to come from? Well, it's not coming from a lot of liver glycogen. So it's going to come from fat that your liver is producing and trafficking. So you have a higher flux of fat in your bloodstream. Now, the question is that bad for you? And the answer to that is, I don't think we really know, although there is more and more evidence coming out there to showing that it may not be a problem, that it could be just totally fine. So I don't say that with 100% confidence yet, because I just don't think we have the studies that are there. I do think those studies are coming. In fact, there'll be some that'll probably come out later by the end of this year. So it's just something to keep an eye on. Now, I think you said you were 40, what'd you say, 44, I believe, or something like that. And so you are in an age group where you could potentially get some sort of coronary imaging of your heart, say a coronary artery calcium score, which would give you more evidence or more information to tell you what you'd want to do chronically. And I don't know, like I said, what the situation is in Australia on the ease of obtaining those. But I mean, that's not an uncommon pattern, particularly in lean people that go very low carb. That's actually probably, we see that more often than not. Now, if you happen to have been obese, if you had class 3 or class 2 obesity and your BMI was above 35, which many people are, unfortunately, going low carb often has the opposite effect. We just end up losing or decreasing our LDL until we get down to a normal weight or even a lean weight. And that's where it's confusing, because you're like, I've gotten healthier because I'm not overweight anymore, but my cholesterol went up. So what does that mean? I think in my opinion, and I'll say this very clearly, this is an opinion based on a lot of the data that I believe is out there. Elevated LDL cholesterol in the setting of a low carb diet in a lean, otherwise metabolically healthy person I think LDL cholesterol is a dependent variable, and whether it causes heart disease or not, or significantly increases the risk of heart disease, probably depends on other factors. And looking at you and hearing your background, everything else is maxed. You probably don't have high blood glucose. You probably don't have high blood pressure. You probably don't have a lot of underlying inflammation. And as you mentioned, it got better on carnivore. Any inflammation you had, gut inflammation, irritation, improved. And so when we look at what causes heart disease, I look at it as like building a fire. If I want to build a fire, I can get some wood, I need oxygen, and I need some kind of spark, right? And if I don't have any of those 3 things, I can't make the fire happen. I could have all the wood in the world, but if there's no oxygen, it's not going to burn. Well, maybe, I guess it was some other gas, but you get the idea. If there's no spark, it won't burn. So what is the spark? Maybe it's vascular damage or inflammation. What is the wood? Maybe it's cholesterol. What is the oxygen? Maybe it's a metabolic syndrome environment or something like that. So you can see the analogy there. So again, I would not say it's nothing to ignore, but I would say get more information at this time. And then maybe in a year or 2, we can tell you, hey, it's totally fine. Don't worry about it. That's how I would approach this at this point. Obviously, you said you feel better. I don't know what your long-term plan is. Most people that do carnivore for whatever reason, they feel better. They will do it maybe strictly for a period of time. Some people add some food back in. You had a reasonably good diet before. Maybe you use it periodically to feel better. Like you said, you fast a couple times a year. Yeah. Use it in that fashion. But if you ever say, I don't feel as good as I think I could, maybe we'll do carnivore for a month or 2 and then just keep that going. And that to me is very reasonable and sustainable for a lot of people.
Yeah. And I really loved it for the running. I really loved how I felt, and the recovery was amazing. So I definitely stick to it for running. As you said, I'm probably going to do it periodically, but I definitely will have more meat and less veggies, because what happened was, I told you I grew up eating mostly meat, and then when I moved to Australia and started studying nutrition science and all that, I got convinced that I need more vegetables. So my ratio has shifted. I started eating more vegetables and less meat. And now I just think I'm going to switch it. It's really funny because I thought I conditioned myself to have vegetables. And I thought when I switched to a carnivore diet, I was going to miss veggies and I was going to miss fruits. And I didn't miss it at all. And as a matter of fact, I don't even feel like eating veggies right now. I did feel like eating a little bit of berries, and I was missing a coffee. But still, I haven't been able to have broccoli. I feel like, then I look at it and I'm like, oh no, I don't think I can do it. Yeah, it's much more satisfying.
It is interesting that many of us are conditioned to like vegetables or eat them or tolerate them. I never liked them. As a kid, I never liked them. As an adult, I never liked them. I forced myself to eat them because I thought I needed them for whatever reason. And the only way I could tolerate them if I smothered them in enough fat or some kind of seasoning, butter, or wrapped it in bacon so I could gag it down. But those people that claim they like eating like just plain spinach leaves or just plain cauliflower, plain broccoli with this uncooked raw, it literally tastes like eating styrofoam in many ways. And so I don't see how people enjoy that stuff, but I guess there's some people that say they do. Anyway.
And also, I need to say what was really good about carnivore diet was the simplicity of it. Like making veggies and salads and everything, it's so time consuming, and also it's really expensive. Like I eat everything organic. So having organic veggies, organic berries, it costs so much. With the meat, I have my meat delivered once a week. It was organic grass-fed, grass-finished meat. And then it literally takes me 6 minutes to make a steak. So I'll just bring a raw steak with me to work and just cook it for 6 minutes in tallow. So I didn't spend a lot of money. I didn't spend a lot of time preparing meals, and it just tastes delicious. That's another thing. I thought I was going to use herbs and spices because I like a lot of herbs and spices. But cooking steak in a lot of tallow with salt, it just tastes so good. You don't really need any herbs and spices or condiments. Yeah.
Yeah, meat tastes pretty darn good. It's inherently, you don't need to, like a lot of people do the carnivore diet because it is so simple. And I think, should nutrition have to be hard to figure out how to nourish yourself properly? There are no animals on the planet that need someone to tell them what to eat of what and how much of something to eat. And it is very easy. A lot of people like that. They prefer that to some of the other ones because they just say, I'll eat a steak when I'm hungry or something, ground beef or some eggs or something like that. Yeah. Do you, as someone who, I don't know what like you said, if you have an online presence or what your company does and people hear about, I don't know how vocal you've been about doing this diet. If you were, obviously we heard about you, so obviously you must be somewhat. Has there been any sort of pushback from that? Because you're like I said, a lot of women, like you said, you did vegan. We see a lot of women that are health conscious and often thin and want to stay thin, will go plant-based, and then also say, no, I'm saving they think they're saving the animals, not really. But has there been much sort of negativity directed your way because of what you've done or tried to do?
No, actually not on my personal social media. I don't really have many negative comments. There's a lot of support. I think a lot of people that are following me are very health conscious and health educated. So there was a lot of support. I didn't have any bad comments. But on my business website, which is the meat-based snacks, we often have a lot of really negative comments and like just really full-on rude comments from all sorts of people. And sometimes it's really funny when they post. And yeah, but no, I didn't have very much negative response because obviously I perform well on the diet, and I do perform well. Before I started the carnivore diet, I did another running race, which was a half marathon in the mountains. And I did it fasted, and I didn't do any carb loading and had no coffee. And I placed second, and I'm 44. And the other people were in their 20s. So that my results just prove that I'm healthy. Like no one can say, oh, you're unhealthy or you have eating disorder or whatever, because I'm 44, I'm healthy, I'm performing well, I'm not skinny or anything. So I think that people don't really have anything to slam me for, kind of.
Yeah, even if they don't, they will. It's funny. I just actually talked about this today. If someone's words can upset you, if words have a lot of impact on you, then anyone can control you because anyone can say anything at any time. It doesn't matter who they are. A little kid can tell you they think you're fat and ugly and you get upset by that. Who cares? Just don't be worried about people's words. But let me ask you, as far as you'd mentioned, gut felt better energy, you put on muscle, you said you put on a little bit of fat and visceral fat, which potentially may be an issue. Maybe it's not. What were you eating on your carnivore? Did you feel like you were eating more food than you normally do?
Yeah, I was eating no, it's not more food. I just think it was more nutrient dense, more fat, because I was cooking everything in beef tallow. So I thought initially that I was going to have all this variety and eat lots of seafood and fish and whatever. But then I didn't feel like it. So I started eating seafood, fish, and also a lot of fermented dairy. Like eating the dairy was just making me crave more dairy, and I was almost like binging on yogurt and stuff. So I was still doing that. And I ended up just eating steak and eggs, to be honest, and lots of liver. So I grew up eating lots of liver. It's part of our cuisine, and I really love it. I always eat a lot of liver all year round. So my diet in the end was mainly steak, liver, and eggs, and all with a lot of beef tallow. And I was drinking bone broth because I like hot drinks. I couldn't have tea or coffee, and so I was making my own bone broth every week and just drinking lots.
Yeah, there's certainly, with regard to dairy, think about what the purpose of dairy is. It is literally to put weight on things, whether it's a little kid or a baby, a calf or any other mammal. The goal is to grow rapidly. And because of that, there are compounds in there that make you want to keep eating it. So it's not as satiating as it might be. Maybe it's the case of morphones and some of these other things that drive that. So there's certainly that. And a lot of people find that if they're worried about losing weight, giving up dairy is helpful in that regard. Now, again, I don't know. Again, I only from the shoulders up, you look very lean and fit. And you probably don't have a lot of excess body fat. I would guess most people look at you, say you have none, but some of that may be like a lot of people lose weight on carnivore diet. They approach a normal, healthy weight. And some people, maybe they're too thin, will put on a little weight, even body fat, to get to maybe a healthier range. I don't know. I can't say for sure where it is.
So I can give you the numbers. I went from 15.7% of body fat to 17.7% of body fat.
Yeah. Again, 17% body fat on a woman is still very lean. It's still within the realm of essential body fat in many ways. And so I don't know that's a real problem. Let me ask you, as far as it's a Shawn interview, the guy thinks that vitamin A toxicity is killing everybody and it's liver and eggs and all those things are bad. I'm a little bit skeptical on that claim, but do you find, so you did this diet for 1 month or something like that? How long ago was that?
Finished at the end of May.
So recently. So yeah, it's just the first few days of June. What are your plans at this point? Did you add some, because when I first went carnivore, way back in 2016, I did it for a month, and then I brought back in sort of my normal omnivorous foods, and I felt worse. I decided to get my back's hurting a little bit. My guts don't feel as good. Yeah. How do you feel now compared to back when you were doing the diet more strictly?
So I started to have a little bit of coffee because I really like to taste that smell of a coffee. So I don't have coffee every day. I had some coffee, had some berries, and had a little bit of pumpkin. And I had massive stomach cramps yesterday after having all that. So yeah, I don't really like that. So I'm not sure I'm going to do that. So I wanted to speak to you and see what I want to do, but I'm definitely not going to go back to eating too many veggies because obviously I'm not happy with having stomach cramps and bloating. So I think, I don't know, that's what I wanted to ask you. What do you think about eating mainly meat and then adding a little bit of berries, have coffee sometimes?
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with that, quite honestly. It's interesting with the vegetables and what causes the bloating was the fermentation. Fermentation of sugars, fermentation of fibers. And some people say if it's pre-fermented, if I eat a pre-fermented vegetable, there's less of that that can occur to our gut because it's already been pre-digested in a way for us. So that might be helpful to do it that way, although I don't much care for fermented vegetables. I don't like any vegetables, and fermented ones are no better in my view. They kind of look slimy, and I'm not really interested in that. But that could be a strategy. I think some berries occasionally. I think, like I said, as I've said many times, even in my book, humans are omnivorous. We clearly eat what we have available to us. However, we exist on a spectrum, and I don't think there's any need to eat plants. I think they're optional. You certainly won't die without them. At least I don't believe so. I very rarely, if ever, eat them, and I'm almost 60 years old and I'm doing okay. I'm still getting after it. So it's one of those things where
blood tests, all my vitamins and minerals are perfectly fine after the month on carnivore, if not better. Like my blood tests have actually improved in many aspects. What was also interesting, so I had a little bit of less blood iron after the month, but I had more red blood cells. So it's like my body was utilizing the iron better to create more red blood cells. Do you see that often?
That makes sense. A lot of times when you say iron, and it could be the ferritin, which is sometimes elevated, or iron in general, is regulated mostly, well, particularly in all people, most of the controls how much we absorb. Our gut sort of dictates how much iron we absorb. If we don't need it, we just excrete it when we go to the bathroom. And when people are metabolically not as healthy, i.e. they have some degree of metabolic syndrome or some inflammatory stuff going on, that system doesn't work as well, I believe. And then you might over-accumulate iron in that situation. And again, and maybe you're not utilizing it correctly. As you mentioned, iron is part of red cell formation. And when we have the most common form of anemia is iron deficiency anemia worldwide. One of the most common, I think it is the most common deficiency around the world is iron deficiency. And a lot of women in particular, because not only do they maybe underconsume, but they also, if they're menstruating, they lose iron every month in the form of menstruation. Yeah, it makes sense to me. I've seen that before. I think a lot of things normalize in many ways. And again, I don't tend to get too hung up on lab results because ultimately you got to realize that these things change every day, and they can change every hour in some cases, depending on what lab we're talking about. Glucose, it can change literally, I'm wearing a CGM and it changes every 1 minute. It's changing sometimes dramatically in the course. If I'm exercising real hard, it'll go up or something like that, or so on and so forth. So I don't really get too concerned about labs unless there's something really lining up with some clinical symptoms. It sounds like clinically, you're like, maybe you felt as best as you ever have at some point or something close to that. It sounds like you're generally healthy in general. So yeah. Do you have family around you, by the way? Do you have a family that lives with you, or do you, I don't know what you're.
My family are back in Czech Republic. I'm here
I
always.
see. So you don't have anybody saying, hey, this is crazy, don't do that. Because a lot of people are like their husband, their wife, their kids or parents say, oh, you're crazy, you're going to have all this cholesterol. No one is concerned about you in that regard.
And my friends and my family, they all think I'm crazy, so they don't really question anything I do. They just praise the Lord.
Did they think you were crazy before, though, already?
Yeah, they don't think I'm crazy, just full stop. So whatever I do, they just play, I will never.
I'd say it's funny we have this whole sort of this, you're a health nut or you're orthorexic because you don't have an eating disorder. Literally, I think most people have an eating disorder. You look at what most people eat, and it's like garbage. And that to me is an eating disorder. And if you just eat healthy, all of a sudden people think you're weird or something wrong with you. You care about your health. We're going to put a label on you. And that's just a way of saying, I think it's a way industry just tries to reinforce the normality or normalizing the illness that we see in everybody in society.
It blows my mind that someone can tell you're crazy for eating meat, but then it's not crazy to eat all the industrially manufactured crap that's not even food, that's just chemical, and people think that's normal. That people are brainwashed. It's really sad. I actually feel sorry for people.
Yeah, I think we're starting to unbrainwash people. It's like this, you have this hypnotism and you have to turn it the other way. And it's a long process, but it's interesting to see how the industry is pushing back now because they're having the government saying there's nothing wrong with ultra-processed food. You can have a fully healthy diet eating all 91% ultra-processed food, as USDA's study said. Or we have these dietitians saying that all foods are healthy. And I go to the grocery store and I see blue artificial flavored maple syrup. I'm saying that's not food. Who in the right mind would claim that any amount of that is good for us? It's just awful stuff. And
crazy.
I don't want to be too hyperbolic, but that stuff there's no reason to eat this stuff.
I know, but actually I have to tell you something what is even more concerning. So I was at a sports nutrition conference where there was conference for professionals. And they were recommending diets full of ultra-processed foods to athletes. And I questioned that. I'm like, why you need to eat all this crap? Like, why can't you just fuel with real food? And they said, no, as an athlete, you can't fuel with real food because it's not enough calories, not enough nutrients, not enough this, not enough that. And you actually have to have ultra-processed food. So the recommendation was like ice cream. So a type of, what was there on the menu? White bread with peanut butter and jelly, lollies, Cliff bars, just full of crap. And they literally said, no, as an athlete, you can't fuel with real food. It's not enough.
Yeah, it's like the Gatorade Sports Science Institute that's funding all these studies and funding, and most of these conferences. You go to any conference and they've got all these vendors, right? They're those ones that pay for the conference in many ways through their rental fees. Of course, dietitians groups that are totally bought and paid for by Nestle and Coca-Cola and PepsiCo and God knows what. I mean, it's you know where it's coming from. It's coming from very much a conflict of interest sort of thing. I just ignore this stuff, and hopefully enough people are out there. It really saddens me when you have physicians recommending this stuff. You have dietitians. You have other people out there that are clearly conflicted in many ways, and it's sad that you would compromise your ethics in that regard. It's you're advocating that someone eats pure garbage to even be an athlete, which isn't, I guess that's the way it is. The good news is, I was like, hey, my competition is getting easier because everybody's sick, and my kids have a better, they're gonna have a better, easier life because they're gonna stand out above everybody else who's stuck in this mediocrity, mired in this awful food addiction. Maybe they're all taking their Ozempic shots and stuff. How is that? By the way, let me ask you that question just to get your perspective on that. Are you seeing a lot of these obesity drugs, anti-obesity drugs being taken over in Australia, these GLP-1 drugs?
Yes, everyone is loving it. Like, you're around, but like so many people, it's been sold out. Like, it's like surely too many people, so many people are Ozempic. And I even wrote a blog about it because I tried to educate a lot of my clients on our website. So I wrote a blog about it, and it's really concerning because as people go on those drugs, they don't exercise, don't eat healthily, lose muscle mass, and that creates more issues. So what do you think about it?
That's probably the majority. Obviously, I think it will benefit a small segment of the population, but really, this is really something. If you are not prepared to be on this drug the rest of your life, you should think really long and hard about not doing it, because not only are there going to be issues, you're going to regain any weight you lost when you come off the drug. You might regain more. You might have more fat cells due to the tendency toward hyperplasia. You may suppress your own endogenous production of GLP-1. You may not even be able to do that to the degree. It's like being on a bunch of steroids and guys see their testicles shrink up because they can't produce it anymore. Or you may be so habituated to high levels of GLP-1 that when those high levels are there in your body, there's no way your body can keep up with that. Your body makes a tiny amount compared to what the drug dosages are. And now you're chronically adapted to high levels and you don't have it anymore because you couldn't tolerate it. Maybe you had side effects, maybe you can't afford it anymore, whatever. Now you're in a situation where you're maybe even hungrier than you were before. And now you have even worse problems. So I think we're going to see an immense number of people where this is going to turn around and bite them in a very significant way. And of course, drug companies will largely be immune from any sort of retribution. Then maybe they'll pay a small fine for them. Even a multi-billion-dollar fine for some of these companies is literally spare change. They have so much money that it's okay, yeah, we'll pay the fine, no big deal. They factor that into the product cost and all that stuff. Yeah, I don't think it's a good way to go. The only people that are going to have any kind of success are going to be doing the things they should be doing anyway. Eating more protein, lifting weights, exercising, not eating garbage. But why don't you just do that to start with? It's like I said, people say, well, anyway, I mean, there's a lot of excuses out there. Like I said.
The thing is that, okay, people lose weight on these drugs, but they're not getting any fitter. They're not getting more muscle mass, better mobility, stronger heart. That's what happens when you exercise. But this completely takes exercise out of the equation. So these people, okay, they might lose weight, but they'll probably be immobile and on crutches by the time they're 50 or 60.
We'll have to see. Like I said, any drug that comes out, and you can take this to the bank, any drug that comes out, the initial proclamations on how effective it is, they are always overestimated, and the side effects are always underestimated. This is just, we see that over and over again. So whatever they say, you can say, I believe about 50% of that, and whatever they say is bad about you, so it's probably double of that, and that's probably somewhere close to the actuality of things. I've seen it for years as a physician, drug after drug, just underdelivered, more problems with it than one. But that's healthcare. That is what healthcare, I hesitate to even call it healthcare. It's the sick care model. And the reason these types of drugs, and this is what they want to develop, they want lifestyle drugs. They don't want anything that cures disease. They don't want anything that's really sick people are concerned with. They just want people to chronically stay in a state of suboptimal health, chronically being consumers, chronically being a renewable subscription model, that's what we have. That's what we have, and it's unfortunate. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox because I can go on about this stuff for a long time. You said you had a lot of beef, what about lamb? Is that something you prefer over there? Lamb is quite prevalent in Australia, I know.
I do love lamb. Yeah, it's my favorite. I actually didn't have a lot of lamb for some reason, though. I had a lot of beef. I don't know, I just felt like eating really fatty steaks. Yeah.
When you don't have carbohydrates, you need energy from some source, and fat's where it is. You can get some very fatty lamb. Lamb thighs can be very fatty, I think. I've had some great lamb. Here in the U.S., we don't consume as much lamb because it's not made as much. It's not as popular. Maybe people don't like the taste. It's more expensive. But lamb can be, and arguably lamb is even better than beef when it comes to nutrition. You can make that argument, I think.
I love any kind of meat, to be honest.
Yeah,
liver
for sure.
the best.
Yeah, okay.
I had some deer liver. That was amazing. We have a lot of deer in Australia. Actually, at the moment, it's too much. And whoever has good license, they encourage people to go hunting for deer because it's too much. It's like a pest. So my friend went hunting with his son and then brought me lots of deer liver and deer meat. So I had that as well. Yeah,
the only concern about deer is a little lean. It's tough to get enough fat with deer. But what about the kangaroo? Have you had kangaroo while you're there?
I did have kangaroo, but that's very lean and it's not my favorite meat, to be honest. It doesn't have a lot of fat. It's very gamey. It's not so my favorite.
Yeah, I've had some kangaroo. No, I never had kangaroo. No, sorry, that was ostrich. My bad. I've had ostrich before. Still lean. I'm not my favorite. Like I said, it's tough to beat beef. I think that's clearly my favorite. The cow is my favorite animal. I like them. They taste good. So I hope we have more of them. It's funny. I talked to a rancher this morning in Mexico, Chihuahua. His name is Alejandro Carrillo. The regenerative ag down in Chihuahua, Mexico. He's literally turning the desert green with his cows. I asked him, I said, and he goes all around the world, and he's quite insightful. I said, there's about 1 billion cattle on Earth right now. That's what we have, about 1 billion cows. I said, what do you think realistically we could support on Earth without? And he said he thinks we could hold about 5 billion. So we could 5-fold the number of cows on Earth. That would be great because it would help reverse the desertification that's going on. If you manage it correctly, you could actually put more soil and microbes and improve the water carrying capacity of the land and improve the biodiversity and increase the wildlife if we did that. But again, it's got to be enough people, you, myself, and millions more that are going to have to make that a reality. So I'm not a pessimist. I'm optimistic, but I think it's a fight. We got to keep our minds optimistic and energized because we feel good. And why not? Why not make the world a better place with more cows and happier people and more better nourished people? We have so many people that are malnourished, especially the younger generation, where they're surviving on ultra processed foods and they've got all these mental health issues and on, and it's just not good. It's not a good thing. So we've got just a couple minutes left. Why don't you share, do you have a website or social media or anything like that where you talk about, I don't know, nutrition and stuff like that?
Yeah, I have a social media with my name, Veronika Larisova, and then also Cheese Nutrition. And the website is wearechief.com. And there's
how do you spell that chi?
wearechief.com. And that's in the article section. I write most of the articles, and it's all free education about all different topics and also free downloads and things like that. So I try to educate people, and everything that I write is science-based. I search for all new science on PubMed and read it properly and then make my conclusions based on that. So
yeah, I just went over to your Instagram and I see you're not overweight at all. So you're quite fit and lean. So good for you. Anyway, Veronika, thanks for doing this. I appreciate that. And maybe if I ever get down to Sydney, we can eat a steak or something.
Yeah.
Like that. It'd be a lot of fun.
Also, I wanted to ask you, would you come on my podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We can do that. Yeah.
So how do we organize that?
Yeah, I'll tell you after this. So anyway, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.